All right, buckle up, folks, because today we're going deep into the heart of MotoGP.
Deep into the heart, that's right.
You know, MotoGP, where the limits get pushed, the margins are razor thin, and where, this weekend at least, all eyes are on Marc Marquez.
Yeah, can't take your eyes off him, can you? Especially here in Austin. It's a track that seems tailor-made for his style. But of course, there are other champions on this grid, all with their own stories, and we're going to unravel those too.
Absolutely. We've got some incredible sources to dissect today, giving us a real 360 view of what went down in those practice sessions at COTA. That revealing interview with Marc Marquez himself, seriously, if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Oh, it's pure gold.
And of course, no deep dive would be complete without the official timing sheet, the cold, hard truth of who's fast and who's, well, not so fast.
Right, the numbers don't lie.
So our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to extract the intel, the nuggets of wisdom from all these sources and give you the inside track on what's really going down in MotoGP, especially as it relates to the man of the hour, Marc Marquez.
The man of the hour and maybe the season. But we'll see. Austin is just the beginning, right?
Right. So let's paint a picture of Friday at COTA. Practices in the books, and it was a mixed bag, literally. The day started with those ominous clouds rolling in, track nice and wet, really tested who could dance in the rain.
And thankfully for the fans, thankfully for us, it dried out, which gave us a chance to see who could adapt and find the speed on slicks too. A real test of versatility.
And buzz was all about Marquez. Like, even before he hit the track, there was this tweet predicting he'd dominate even in the wet.
I saw that tweet.
So when FP1 wrapped up and Marquez wasn't at the top, in fact, he actually binned it, you could almost hear a collective sigh of relief from the other teams.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of, hey, he's human after all. But, you know, that just lights a fire under him, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. A crash for Marquez is like a warm-up lap for most riders. But back to that FP1 session, Aprilia struggles right off the bat, something we'll definitely come back to later.
Yeah, they were definitely off the pace.
But what really struck me was Marquez's own assessment of the session. He straight up said he needed more time in the wet on the Ducati. And this is a guy with 8 world titles. To hear him admit he's still learning, still finding the limit, it's kind of humbling, right?
It is. It shows the level of commitment these guys have.
Yeah.
I mean, to be the best, you can't ever stop learning, can you?
Definitely not. And the thing is, with Marquez, you just know he's going to be analyzing every single inch of that crash, dissecting the data, figuring out how to be even faster next time it rains.
Oh, yeah. He's like a machine, processing information, always finding ways to improve. That's what makes him so formidable.
But speaking of formidable, quickly turn to another Marquez Alex. There was this real sense of anticipation, you know, folks saying he could challenge his brother more this year on the Ducati.
Interesting dynamic, right? Having brothers in the same team, both incredibly talented, both with something to prove.
It's going to be fascinating to watch, that's for sure. And you have to wonder, will Ducati try to manage them, play some team tactics, or just let them race each other?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question. And we've seen it before, haven't we? Think back to Rossi and Lorenzo in that Yamaha garage. The tension, the mind games, it can be explosive.
Oh, for sure. It adds a whole other layer of drama. But let's move on to that final practice session, the one where conditions improved and the real battle lines were drawn.
Right. The track dried out, slicks went on, and the timing screens lit up. Pretty much sums it up.
It does, doesn't it? Marquez explains why he pulled out 0.7 of a second over the rest in practice 1. I mean, it's not even subtle.
0.7 in modern MotoGP, that's an eternity. It's a statement.
It's a statement, absolutely. And remember, this is after that crash in FP1, which for most people would be a confidence killer. But Marquez, he just seems to shake it off and find another gear. How does he do it?
To give us some clues.
Yeah, that's a must-watch.
Marquez talks about feeling good, feeling comfortable right from the start in those tricky mixed conditions. But that early crash, he owns it, admits it was a moment of overconfidence, a little too much throttle, and bang, you're on your backside. Water planning, he called it. A wake-up call.
So almost like that crash, that moment of vulnerability, it actually sharpened his focus for when the track dried out.
It seems that way. He talks about the need for concentration, even when the feeling with the bike is good. But here's the kicker. Despite that dominant lap, that 0.7 gap, he's already saying he expects it to be much closer when it's fully dry.
That's the sign of a champion right there. Confidence, but not arrogance. He's not getting ahead of himself.
Exactly. He knows the competition's going to come back stronger, and he's ready for it.
So let's talk about the competition. Obviously, Marquez was the headline act, but The timing sheets tell us a lot about the other contenders and who's looking strong or not so strong.
Right. And the first thing that jumps out is Ducati. 5 bikes in the top 10, that's a statement. They're the team to beat right now, no question.
Absolutely. But the big talking point, the elephant in the room, is Francesco Bagnaia, reigning champ, factory Ducati, and he's way down in 10th, almost 8/10ths behind Marquez. The Bagnaia is feeling the pressure now.
You know, having Marquez as your teammate, a guy who's expected to win every weekend, it's got to change the dynamic in the garage, right?
Yeah.
Bagnaia is not the undisputed number 1 anymore.
Definitely. And it's not just the time gap moment on track where Marquez seemed to, let's say, deliberately avoid giving Bagnaia a toe.
Oh, you noticed that too, huh? It was subtle, but those little mind games, they can really play at a rider's head.
Especially when it's Marquez doing the playing. Bagnaia's comments from earlier in the weekend where he talked about maybe going back to the 2024 bike setup, that's got to be a worry for Ducati.
It is. It suggests he's not completely comfortable with the direction they've taken with the 2025 bike. And for a champion like Bagnaia to even consider going back to an older spec, that's a sign that something's not quite right.
It is. It's like saying, hey, this new fancy cool, it's not working for me. Give me back my old hammer.
Exactly.
But let's move on to some of the other performances. We had a strong showing from the VR46 Ducati guys. Di Giannantonio and Morbidelli, second and third. Praised Morbidelli, said he's looking much better this year.
Which is great to see, right? Morbidelli had a tough couple of years, so to see him back up there fighting for podiums, that's a good sign for him and for the championship. It shows that Ducati has a bike that can work for different riders, different styles.
Absolutely. And right behind them in fourth, who else but Alex Marquez. Consistent pace, just off his brother's time. Looks like those preseason predictions about him being a bigger threat this year might be right on the money.
He's looking good, isn't he? And, you know, having your brother as your benchmark, that's got to push you to another level. Talk about sibling rivalry.
For sure. And a little further down the order, we had a bit of a surprise with Jack Miller putting that factory KTM in sixth.
Yeah, Jack, always a character.
Often one of the first to gamble on slick tires in drying conditions, which might have played a part in his strong result.
It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. But when it pays off big.
For sure. And speaking of KTM, both their factory riders, Acosta and Vinales, finished inside the top 8. So they're looking competitive, even if they're not quite on Marquez's level.
KTM is a team on the rise, and they're making their presence felt. They're not content with just being midfield runners anymore. They want podiums. They want wins.
Absolutely. And then we had Joan Mir, managing to put that Honda in 9th. They mentioned that riders are still interested in joining Honda, despite their recent struggles.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? But I guess there's still that belief that Honda will turn it around.
They're a factory with a huge history, a ton of resources. You can never count them out, but right now they've got a lot of work to do.
They do.
And then there's Aprilia. We talked about their struggles earlier, and the timing sheet paints a pretty bleak picture. No riders in the top 10, but Zeki, their highest placed, way down in 13th, almost 2 seconds off the pace.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow, especially for a factory that came into the season with such high hopes.
They'll be scratching their heads trying to figure out what went wrong, because that's not just a setup issue. That's something more fundamental.
Yeah, they need to find some answers.
Yeah.
And quickly.
Right.
Because the longer these struggles continue, the harder it's going to be to catch up.
Bigger picture, the championship implications of this weekend. He pointed out that Austin's a track where Marquez has historically dominated.
He's called it his happy hunting ground in the past, hasn't he?
He has. So if he can win here, make a statement early in the season, that could put a lot of pressure on his rivals.
It could, especially on Bagnaia. If he's already struggling and Marquez starts racking up wins, that could dent his confidence. And championship battles are as much psychological as they are about outright speed.
They are. And finally, no MotoGP deep dive would be complete without a little bit of silly season gossip. Touched on the rumors about rider movements for 2026 and beyond.
Oh yeah, the rider market, always churning.
Acosta to Honda, Martin's situation with Aprilia, even Quartararo's name being linked with Ducati. It adds a whole other dimension to the racing.
It does, because, you know, these guys are out there on track trying to impress their future employers. It's like a giant job interview.
It is. So as the dust settles on Friday in Austin, what are your key takeaways? What are the big talking points for you?
Well, for me, it's got to be Marquez's performance. To come in on a new bike after a crash in FP1 and set a time like that, it's just incredible. He's the benchmark, the guy to beat. And the pressure he's putting on the other champions, particularly Bagnaia, that's fascinating to watch.
Agreed. But we also can't ignore the struggles of some of the other big names. Bagnaia is obviously not firing on all cylinders, and Aprilia, well, they've got some serious work to do. It just shows that MotoGP is a constantly evolving beast, and even the established order can be shaken up.
Exactly. You can never take anything for granted in this sport.
So the big questions now, as we head into qualifying and the race. Can Marquez maintain this dominance in dry conditions? Can Bagnaia and Ducati find some answers and close the gap? And can any of the other championship contenders, like Quartararo or Mir, step up and challenge the front?
We'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a weekend full of twists and turns, and I can't wait to see how it all unfolds.
Me neither. And for our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What surprised you most about Friday's practice? Was it Marquez's dominance, Bagnaia's struggles, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon to break down all the action from qualifying and the race.
See you then.